Okay, hello everyone and welcome to round one of what I have dubbed our Worlds Collide tournament. Old World against New World, with mostly America against Europe and some New Zealand splashed in, I do believe. Regardless, this round we are going to have King Morgan, Black Magic, Prince Imrahil, and Steph Verzelen. I have no idea. Verzelen? No idea. They're Steph and Prince. We're just going to go with that. Starting debt is starting to get around the point where we might see a found very, very soon. There does look like there's plenty of iron and carbon kind of available this map. We did have somebody prioritize Scavenger, Black Magic, really wanting to pick up on that. He is just going to take 2 high carbon locations immediately, with the potential for a little adjacency in the future. Should be more than enough for him to move forward. Nobody else really had a super high value location they wanted to take. And everybody just ends up dropping expansive, very, very generalized faction, of course, able to do a whole lot of things. Everybody kind of sees, I guess, that, yeah, there's kind of plenty of resources. I'd like to just be able to gather a lot of them for myself, and that's what they're going to be doing to move forward. It is important to note that it went Steph, Prince, and then King Morgan. So King Morgan is going to have the primary claim advantage out of that. Steph with a very small time advantage going over there, but unfortunately for him, he kind of pulls the trigger first and doesn't really get any claim advantage long term. But he did, of course, get his choice in location. Hopefully that'll work out well for him. He was the first to manage to push to HQ2 besides Black Magic as our scavenger. Black Magic, as expected, quite far ahead of the competition right now in terms of upgrades. He should stay that way for most of this game up against several expansive players who, ironically enough, expand very, very slowly these days. Steel mills aren't online for King Morgan, a bit unfortunate, but of course steel is going to be in a bit of an awkward spot with so many people consuming iron quite heavily early in the game. That's going to be the downside that he has for founding just a little bit later. Those small differences in time can make a big difference in money. Hopefully for King Morgan, his quick extra claim will help make up for it. Unfortunately, not able to move into the high water pump. So what's happened here is Prince has taken kind of the medium close water pump, and Steph took the farther away high water pump. Thankfully for King Morgan, he still has a decent high water location if he would like it. Not too far away. Unfortunately, not so great adjacency attached to that, so maybe a little bit awkward. He'll just have some decisions to make later in this game. King Morgan also has moved very quickly into glass kilns without silicon available, so that's going to be a little bit awkward for him if anybody else also moves into glass. Thankfully, though, there are already warehouses attached to the colony. Fair amount of glass consumption going on. We'll just have to see how that's going to work out for him, and if he can easily move into silicon on HQ3 to ensure that his glass kilns will stay productive. 2 players up to HQ3 now. Power, as expected in this sort of match, has pushed over 200 bucks. Of course, much faster than expected, along with that power shortage, because we had 5 offices at the colony. That was already a ton of pressure. Then you have 3 expansive players drop. They all drop steel mills. Lots more pressure on power. Very, very problematic potentially for some of our players. And suddenly, along with that shortage, power gets to be ridiculously expensive. First player to move into that is potentially going to have a big advantage in that market, with the exception of Black Magic, who will have to pay through so much debt to ever manage to actually make any money off of it. He could still get there, certainly could still get there, but it's something that he is going to have to be worried about. Now, Prince has hit HQ level 3, which should provide him with his extra found claim as well, given that he founded 3rd this game, I do believe. And he is going to be the one to take our geothermal auction for 24,000. This leaves no geothermal vents left on the map. And with silicon already up at $51, that makes solar panels very strange. And this is a little bit of what I was concerned about with King Morgan and his glass kilns. You can see they are not particularly effective at this point. He's going to need to get into this silicon and be able to transition something like his iron mines into solar panels to make sure that he doesn't simply fall out of this game on debt. Already got 1 solar panel down, but of course all this time this is hurting his glass kilns. They are now no longer making him money. as everybody tries to fly into solar panels in response to the high power price and the lack of geothermal vents on the map. Everything just starts to get very awkward very quickly, and Prince, I'm very concerned about this path forward for him. He is already in sea levels of debt, and this is before an interest tick. Sea levels of debt. He's got reactors down, costing massive amounts of power, and this geothermal plant is not yet up. It is currently defended. There was an attempt at a circuit overload early. The Goon Squad, however, had landed early, and so he caught that, but he's still in D levels of debt. Gonna have to work his way up through that, and if people catch this, if people are paying attention and watching, they may realize the D-level debt player may not have his geotherm Goon Squadded, potentially very problematic for Prince moving forward. The truly massive amount of debt he has moved out of the steel mills and into farms, but those are immediately frozen. I think Prince might be in for a world of hurt this game. And meanwhile, Black Magic, he's managed to hold steady on his debt due to acquiring that early geothermal plant and taking a second one as well. This one is overloaded. However, Black Magic, despite having a massive debt disadvantage early in the game, manages to push the lead he acquired from both being a scavenger and founding much faster than all of his opponents into multiple geothermal plants on a low geotherm map with offices, and that has given him a significant advantage over his opponents, and he could very easily at this point push toward making a profit in power, especially if he can use things like these circuit overloads and power surges to his advantage to continue to shut down his opponent's power production and increase their power costs. Particularly effective against somebody like Steph, who has elected to put his primary solar panels right next to his steel mills, and that's exactly what we're going to see out of Black Magic. He is going to get aggressive against these solar panels and steel mills. That's going to be painful for Steph. Very, very bad indeed. Now, Prince, for whatever reason, has managed to keep his geotherm online. Nobody getting too aggressive against that. Would love to see some dynamite in that location. It's a fair distance from the headquarters. Would take a long time to repair. Not too terribly expensive, but you still don't want to be having to spend resources on that, especially when you don't have steel mills of your own to use. But Prince is managing to hold on in that sea level of debt. Nobody getting too aggressive, nobody punishing him. And he looks like he's going to manage to hold on for now in this game. He's also managed to push up to HQ4, and Steph is the one kind of lagging behind in these upgrades. He's committed quite heavily to solar panels, not making any money off of them. This kind of prevented him from keeping up with everybody else in these upgrades, while Prince is doing quite nicely when it comes to cash, just a little bit weak when it comes to debt. Black Magic setting himself up very nicely to be making money very, very soon off this power. You can see he's paying down 600 debt a second at the moment, and very, very soon that is going to turn into pure profits for him. That's going to be fantastic, allowing Black Magic to kind of catapult himself into HQ5 and look toward a late game plan from there. We're just going to close out these menus because they bother me. Prince, interestingly enough, first person to manage to get to 5. You can see that his commitment to this food was very, very strong. He's got decent close water production. Hits on these water pumps are going to hurt, though. Water continues to go up in price. And Prince, well, now at negative 8.8 water a second. Suddenly, all of his production is looking quite poor. He just managed to reach HQ5, so he may be able to transition into something effective like these steel mills that we're seeing now. But he's also recently made himself very vulnerable by not having a lot of income right now, by not having a lot of cash right now. Prince may get bought out in just a moment here. He's going to have to hope that King Morgan can keep him in this game by threatening Black Magic so heavily. And it does look like that is what's going to happen. One has to question King Morgan's decision to buy into Black Magic, stop this lead, as suddenly Black Magic's ire has turned toward King Morgan. Now, this is giving Prince his fighting chance. There was the option for both of these players to simply bully this HQ level 5 expansive player out of the game. That's always the one that I like to see when someone has taken this greedy route. But Prince, well, he's been given a second lease on life, and we'll just have to see how he can use it this game. Big overloads dropping on these panels. It's a little bit late for these. Power has dropped to 115. No longer nearly as valuable as it used to be. Would have liked to see these overloads come down earlier from Black Magic, potentially. Especially just when day broke, perhaps. Would have been nice to see. And Black Magic, I'm not sure about that decision. 14,000 for a hacker array when you're already threatening to buy somebody, when cash you've decided is very, very important to you in this moment. This is 14,000 cash effectively for this hacker array, assuming that he can pay off all this debt with his power production, which may be a bit of an interesting assumption at this point. Perhaps it was the right decision. Black Magic realizing I'm not going to be making a whole lot of money from power anymore this game. Best not to worry about it. However, he is going to be shorting out power with this hacker array. Interesting decision. Interesting decision. Power just continues to drop during the day. Down to $60 at this point. Superconductor also just getting picked up. I don't know if the power market is anything to be fighting over from here moving forward. And all of this is just giving Prince time. Notice how Prince hasn't really had the cash to properly defend himself yet. This is how bad of a position he got put in. He wasn't making money, and he didn't have cash on hand. He still hasn't made enough after these transitions he's been forced to make to actually buy up his own stock. He could have been very, very easily killed off this game. But Black Magic gets cold feet after King Morgan gets aggressive against him, and I'm very concerned about how Black Magic has handled that situation moving forward. You can see that he's got a whole bunch of money tied up in Prince that isn't currently doing anything. Prince almost has enough. There it is. He has completely defended himself, and I feel like this money needed to get taken out of Prince very quickly once the assault was guaranteed not to work, once the aggressiveness against the stock was halted by King Morgan purchasing into Black Magic. Black Magic needed to sell out of Prince very quickly, move those resources elsewhere, acquire somebody else, upgrade himself, do something with that money. He could have been far more effective with it if he had moved it around earlier, and that's my big concern for him right now. Now he's working on King Morgan. He's very close potentially to being able to get something done, but once again he would have needed help from somebody else, and nobody's in the mood to do that. What Black Magic has managed to do here is force King Morgan out of his stock, but you can see that upgrade advantage that we talked about that Black Magic should have had has completely evaporated. He's still stuck on 4. Everybody else in 5, and this is the downside of getting aggressive when your opponents are having none of it. Black Magic is going to use this opportunity to simply move into a hologrammed off-world market, and that is going to be the first one of the game. Of course, a slight difference from previous versions of the game is that off-world markets are available on HQ4. You can only acquire one of them, but it is an important detail. And Black Magic back into a little... Nope, that's selling out of King Morgan stock. Just trying to get more and more of his money back in his own hands. I think this is a good decision. This will allow him to catch up in HQ levels while putting this off-world market down. Definitely a very big deal. And we'll just have to see what he can do with that moving forward. Patents have been getting acquired this game, so thus far we have nanotech and superconductor for King Morgan. Steph, meanwhile, is headed to thinking machines and virtual reality. King Morgan also on the way to thinking machines, and after that, slant drilling. So far, where things stand, it looks like Steph will be the one to hit thinking machines first, unless some black market effects have something to say about that. Black Magic's off-world market hit by black market pretty early there. People paying attention. I don't think we have any spies down. It's just kind of an odd construction going on right there that people are going to catch out and notice. That doesn't really make any sense. And so we do, of course, see the dynamite land pretty early on. And that's going to indicate to anybody who didn't catch it that there's something important here that you should be paying attention to. So Black Magic definitely not going to be happy about that. Always the sort of thing players are going to pick up on when your opponents are hanging out at HQ4. Why haven't they hit 5 yet? They had to commit those resources somewhere. They knew Black Magic had a lot of cash on hand due to selling out all that stock. He's got to be doing something with it, so they're always going to be on the watch for something like that off-world market. Well, a lot of these players have a lot of territory now. I'm very concerned for Black Magic moving forward. There is a reasonable black market left to use. Of course, there were EMPs and power surges available this game, along with circuit overloads, and power is going to continue to have that office pressure on it all game. The network virus, dynamite, and Black Magic's gotten a hold of an adrenaline boost, so there are definitely tools to use this game. But still, moving forward, those expansive extra claims are going to be such a big deal. All of his opponents at least 4 claims up over black magic is definitely going to be a concern. Network virus lands onto King Morgan's territory. People just hunting the holograms. Unfortunately, it is not going to be found. And so those buildings are just going to be stuck, frozen still. No hologram spot. The hologrammed Offworld market is, of course, here for King Morgan. And it did get frozen pretty quickly, so one has to assume that that was indeed spotted out when there was a transition away from electrolysis reactor into an electrolysis reactor. Steph, by the way, has been in a very large amount of debt for a very long time, which is going to contribute to why he's buying up his stock right now. It's very, very cheap. He needs to buy that up before he can really consider paying down his debt. Otherwise, he's just kind of making the stock more expensive that he would like to acquire later. So he goes ahead, gets it now. Then he's going to need to work on paying down this debt. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a clear path forward to do that. And so this is just going to end up being hundreds of thousands of dollars out of Steph's pocket that he would rather have. And of course, our greedy player that wasn't punished earlier has managed to push himself into a position where he has okay upgrades, but mostly just a lot of cash on hand from having all this life support production for such a long period of time. His farms have gone relatively unmolested, his electrolysis reactors have continued to be effective, but long term, Prince doesn't have a whole lot actually going his way compared to someone like King Morgan. There's no Offworld market down. There are very, very minimal upgrades when it comes to research. He's only working on his 2nd level of food production now. And all he really has is his large amount of territory and his current cash advantage. He's going to need to find something to do with these in order to be successful long term. Now, something effective would be to go ahead and take over black magic. Black magic has an Offworld market. He'll be an effective subsidiary, but I have to be concerned over what's going to happen if King Morgan manages to not only secure his own stock with his Offworld market that he's got constructing, eventually coming online, 2nd Offworld market on the way for King Morgan already, and King Morgan potentially will have the opportunity to buy into Steph. We can see that Steph is floundering. $14 stock price. That dipped down to 11 at some point. Why not target Steph? Steph also has, I do believe he was the one to pick up thinking machines. He's got virtual reality. He's got a pleasure dome down, making an insane amount of money right now, despite its poor positioning for a pleasure dome. Could have 3 adjacency bonuses. Only has the 2. And on top of that, he also has a fair amount of technology in his favor. So Steph is a very valuable, very, very vulnerable target right now that I really would like to see one of our players get aggressive against. I think that would be the prime target for Prince to take down. Very, very effective, very easily to catapult him into the rest of this game, if only he understood exactly what position this game was in. Steph also looks like he's the only one who's managed to actually sneak the Offworld this game, transitioning that patent lab into the hologrammed Offworld, and now with a 2nd Offworld on the way, people might not even spot that initial one and think that this is Steph's first, assuming that a player that far in debt wouldn't be so greedy with all of their cash on hand. Interest tick coming once again for Steph. This is going to hurt. I want to see exactly how much it takes out. $350,000 of debt. He could pay off a large amount of this at this point quite easily, as he's already made most of the investments that he actually needs to right now. That is really what I'd like to see, I think. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. $107,000 of debt, and immediately afterward, I do believe, he pays that debt down. That is very, very painful. Was sitting somewhere in the vicinity of $400,000 of debt for a moment there. If he had paid the debt down first, that would have been a much, much lighter interest tick, and he would have gotten himself into a slightly more solid position. Well, Prince continuing to play with basically the exact same strategy he has been, just using his large territory and his current cash advantage, but you can see he hasn't managed to actually push that and invest that into something else that was effective just yet. All he's really doing is stopping black magic from getting anything done. And I worry how that's going to turn out for him if King Morgan can ever actually get these off-world markets online and get aggressive against Steph. You can see Steph is very, very cheap right now. And I think it would have been a much better move for our players to try and force that purchase on him. Right now we've got these off-world markets that are trying to go online. What if these hadn't happened? What if Prince had committed to Steph instead of committing to black magic? Prince could just sell out of his black magic stock and threaten Steph right now. Instead, he's just going to buy little bits here and there. Steph obviously now in a position to pay down his debt. But what if he had been killed off earlier? What if a player had managed to pick him off when he was at his very, very weakest, down at that $11 stock price, already had one off-world online at that point? What if they had gotten him at that $14 stock price later on? These would have been options to take him down, but unfortunately that's not what we saw. And so some very greedy plays have managed to push through very effectively this game. Meanwhile, Black Magic, with his quick aggression, he's just been floundering ever since, unfortunately. Stuck on HQ4, struggling with carbon, likely could have committed to another carbon tile. The third carbon tile is never really something you want, but operating on just 4 a second can be very, very painful, especially when everybody else is working to drive up those carbon prices. That's just always something you got to be concerned about, is how much carbon did everybody else take this game? Okay, well, we've got 1.5 from Prince, and I think that's literally it. Just that 1.5. So there's a lot of carbon consumption that was going on when we saw some electronics production going down. We see chemicals available. This has all driven up the carbon price. Only one player can ever have carbon scrubbing, and that hasn't even been taken yet this game. And all of this has made life very, very, very difficult for Black Magic in this game. That hacker array not getting enough work done to really keep him in the game, unfortunately. I don't even know how many hacks we've had. We'll look into that at the end of the game. I don't want to pop out of it just now to go and check these things. Man, lots of aggression against King Morgan. Meanwhile, Steph, he's recovered. Finally he's recovered. But of course, he does have a large amount of his stock already purchased. So one has to wonder who's in the best position at this point, right? Black Magic seems to clearly be in last place. That's what we can interpret from all of this. No real amount of cash on hand, still HQ4, never pushed to 5 because of the ridiculous carbon prices of trying to keep that off-world market online against Dynamite and the consumption that was going on elsewhere. He's in a bad spot. King Morgan has an off-world online, has another off-world constructing, continually getting frozen and attacked, will have 2 off-worlds. He also has nanotech slant drilling and Superconductor, providing him nice boosts to production, but no tech. King Morgan really would have liked to get a purchase done in order to make up for the fact that he has no technology, and that's going to be very painful for him. Prince, on the other hand, has a small amount of tech, but no off-world, but a large amount of stock, and therefore a high stock price. But you can see he hasn't really been making a whole lot of money this game. No real debt for him, decent territory. His off-world has finally been started, but one has to wonder if that's going to be too little too late. And he also, of course, scrapped his technology centers in order to acquire that. Meanwhile, Steph, the one-time D-rated $400,000 in debt, $11 stock price player, with his exceptionally greedy play, was never punished for it, stock never acquired until it had recovered. He's sitting on, like, this is what, 9, 11, 12, 14, 18 techs headed to, 17 techs, I believe, headed to 19 if we take out the power and the food that aren't done yet. And I can count very quickly. Double off-world market, one of them still never seems to have been spotted, hologrammed very effectively. On top of that, he's got thinking machines and virtual reality, pulling in still an insane amount of money from that pleasure dome, fully recovered stock price. His only problem is Prince has 4 of his stock. But of course, Steph seems to be making money far more effectively than Prince at this point. So the question is, what's King Morgan going to do about this situation, right? That's kind of the crux of it all. Is King Morgan going to identify the potential problem that Steph has become through the hologram? Is he going to take out black magic just to get a nice quick boost to his stock price and assume that he'll be able to keep up in technology late game? Which is apparently what he's going to do. This also provides him with immediate 2 stock. King Morgan's other option was, does he take out Prince? Does he take out Steph? He was kind of turning into this position of everybody else has gotten themselves embroiled in their own fights. I've been off on my own. I still have all my own stock. I can feel free to save up money for a purchase. And so the question was, does he take out black magic or does he take out Steph, is basically what it came down to. Black magic was the immediate quick boost to himself that immediately starts bringing in subsidiary income. Steph was the long-term potential purchase that would have shut down arguably the player with the best investments this game, right? But having never spotted Steph's second Offworld, he may not be reading the game correctly. This is just an assumption, but it doesn't appear that he's spotted that. He may know the second Offworld is down by now, but he doesn't seem to know where it is or when it went down. So maybe King Morgan doesn't know everything. He elects to go after black magic and immediately start pulling in what money he can. Unfortunately for him, once again, black magic in that D level of debt, the Offworld is blown up. He is not a particularly valuable subsidiary when it comes to income, only making $17 per share right now is Prince and King Morgan. That's not what you're looking for. And meanwhile, Steph, he continues to develop a massive amount of money. King Morgan's doing a good job making money too. His production is making good money everywhere, it looks like. He's got 30 on the glass, which isn't so great, but he's leaving those in position, I guess, to protect the hologram in the Offworld. No real point in that when it's been attacked so heavily. But the electronics is fine, the food is fine, the steel is fine, the electrolysis is fine. Most of this is all acceptable, right? And then he has slant drilling on the water pumps to make sure that his water is going to be strong. The silicon is certainly weak, and that was definitely an early gameplay that gave him a boost that he was hoping would work out long term. But Prince, I'd say he just has better production all around. With his perfect technology, that's going to be working out great for him. He has to scrap out of the food, which is a little painful, but he's got the electrolysis reactors that are doing well. He's got the steel mills with efficient technology. Those are doing just fine. And his only potential real problem, I would say, is he also has a few wasted tiles out here. Unfortunately for Steph, one of the things that happened was his pleasure dome got heavily cut into because the computer, as a subsidiary for black magic, will not use the hack array. So it changes it immediately into a pleasure dome. This cuts into Steph's pleasure dome production. Not what he's going to be looking for. But Steph, because he has so much more stock, because he has all of Prince, right? He has all of Prince. He has 3 of black magic because Prince had that. Steph has the major stock price advantage, whereas King Morgan kind of had the cash advantage from his early purchase. So that's just what the contest has turned into. This cash advantage of King Morgan, did he manage to develop enough quickly that he can survive the fact that Steph is making so much more money, especially when it comes to subsidiaries. Now, black magic, his income has just completely tanked down to nothing as a subsidiary because he has decided to repair his off-world market that AI has. And so nobody's pulling in anything from that. That's definitely going to hurt King Morgan even more long term. The off-world market unlikely to come up in time to make a significant difference in the amount of money being made this game. That's going to be very unfortunate for King Morgan, as he had significantly more invested into black magic than Prince did. At this point, we can see that stock purchasing has evened out, and so it's once again just kind of a continued race here. It's going to also come down to who's managing their off-world markets better. We can see that Steph is launching weaker resources consistently. He was stuck on food, and he's continued to stay that way. King Morgan, on the other hand, is at least sometimes launching oxygen, which is a significantly more amount of money. 10,000 per launch is nothing to sneeze at. Unfortunately for him, at a much cheaper price, he's very, very easy to acquire. Steph has that money right now. He's got the red button. King Morgan just couldn't quite push there. And Steph, Mr. $11, 400,000 debt, whatever, is going to end up taking over game number 1. Very, very nicely done. I have to say, I think there were some really big mistakes that game not taking out Steph. He was so vulnerable, he was so weak, and he was so heavily investing into himself that he was just easily going to take it if he was left alone.